Hey, welcome to another Movement Parallels Life 15-minute practice. Today we're working on ground movements. You're going to begin, just get yourself situated on your mat. You're not going to need anything for this session today, just some open floor space. And we're going to start with some diaphragmatic breathing. So just getting connected to the breath, oxygenating the body. I'll place my hands on my low abdomen, and as I inhale, feeling my stomach expand. And as I exhale, feeling the light compression in my midsection. And just using this as a time to get focused, get centered, and get ready for the upcoming movement intervals. We're going to be looking at about 11 different movements for a 75-second interval. All right, let's begin. First one is a supine four-corner reach. So I'm using these Jenga blocks as just a little bit of context, something to reach for, because the more intention I put behind the reach, the more stretch I get out of the movement, the more I'm building mobility. So it's very important here to make this pattern as real as possible for yourself. Start on my back, reach across my body, diagonal to the other side, and then reaching to the low diagonals. I'm going to go in a sequence, but then as the interval progresses, I'm just going to start to be a little bit more random. Really taking time to breathe, stretch, and reach through every movement. And try to make sure that you're maintaining control through every piece of the movement. Just a few more here. It's a good opportunity to get connected to the body. Feel where your strength and your support is coming from. Try to feel it coming from the middle of your body. Next pattern, we're looking at a side bent sit swivel to a split kneel. So this is a seated position here. I keep the feet in contact with the floor. Lift the knees side to side. That's the side bent sit swivel. And then I'm going to lift up, rise up to my knees in this split kneeling position. From that split kneel, it can be performed with tuck toes or flat toes, whichever you prefer. They offer two different feelings. The tuck toes gives me a little bit better stretch. And then when I start adding in this reaching pattern, I have a little bit more stability, I find, when I've got my toes tucked. It's ever going to work for you here. You've got 90 seconds to figure out how to make this movement work for you. You can reach at any angle. You can spend as much time in that split kneel position as you want. Make any modifications that are right for you. Always reiterating that point. Figure out what you're learning from this movement through the repetition. And that's why we line out these intervals for a little bit longer. All right, next pattern. This is the long sit rotation with a low reach. So I've just got sitting upright with legs extended, trying to get as tall as I can out of the crown of my head, and then laying to the side, rotating and reaching. I'm going to start to walk my way around the circle. Reach, and then walk my legs together and then walk them wide. This just adds a different element to the movement. It's not necessary, and you get to see from all angles. But it's nice to get a feel for our body weight shifting here and adding some rotation to this basic movement. Hold these stretches as long as you want. Work within your current available range of motion. Don't try to push outside of that. Don't push yourself into an injury. But just observe where your body wants to go, where you feel comfortable, and notice if there's any differences between the right and left sides. Just a few more here. Next pattern. This is a cobbler sit to cross sit into a foot hand crawl position with high hips. A lot of pieces to these movements today. So, all right, we start out our cobbler sit, soles of the feet pressing together. You might call it a butterfly sit or an open bent sit. And I cross my legs, pause there for a moment, and then making this transition to rock forward, cobbler, cross sit, rock forward to my foot hand crawl position, and then up into a high hip position, kind of a modified downward dog type situation there. Try to be as fluid with this as you can and try to hit that cross sit position from each side. Make sure each leg is on top or you're alternating at least a few times. Just be mindful of that. You can spend as much time as you want in either the cobbler, the cross sit, or the modified downward dog. It's up to you. Next pattern here, this knee hand hip roll. Pretty simple here. I'm starting in a knee hand position. I'm sitting to my hip and rolling across my hip until I get back to that knee hand crawl position. And then again, I'll lift my hips up. And then eventually I'm going to start to add in a stand up. This is a really fun movement. You can get very dynamic. It's a very playful, easy type roll. But start slowly and really understand every piece of the movement, understand the sequence behind it, and then start to build the speed from there. As you get more dynamic, you're going to be able to see and feel which elements you're going to need to strip away or where you're going to need to round the corners off a little bit, and how to make this movement smooth. Use your feedback to inform that. All right, next pattern here. We've got an inverted crawl shifting pattern. Easy enough. We've got our inverted crawl or crab crawl position, and just sending my hips forward and backward. I'm really trying to challenge myself for a full range of motion here. As I shift my hips forward, I get a really long, deep, nice stretch in my shoulders. As I draw my hips back, I'm going to start to lift my hips maybe, drive my hips back past my hands, and see if I can build up some shoulder strength there, pressing. This is just all for the sake of being as strong and stable as possible through a larger range of motion. I'm going to start to vary the pattern a little bit. Here you can see modification, just a rolling action or a side-to-side action. You can throw this stuff in as well. Again, start playing with these movements and figure out what feels good for your body. Next pattern, just a seated hip balance with some reaching. Again, the reach is a movement pattern that we can add into pretty much any position, and that's going to help us build more of a stretch, get more of a stretch out of our movements. So feel free to play around with reaching at any angles. And here I'm just shifting my weight from hip to hip, trying to balance, changing my position, extending my legs to see if I can stay balanced there. Challenge yourself. Keep breathing. Keep the tension where you need the tension, and try to keep everything else relaxed. Face should be relaxed. Arms somewhat relaxed. Legs somewhat relaxed. You're going to use your limbs for counterbalancing. And if you need to put your foot down, that's fine. Maybe you try reclining, laying down. Have fun with this one. Last few seconds here on the seated balance. And next, we're going back to that inverted crawl and playing with a pass under transition. And we've seen this one before. So we're supporting ourselves on opposite hand and foot, rotating the body so the leg passes underneath the body and steps through. This is a simple transition to go from prone or face down to supine, face up crawling positions. You can start to link these movements, or you can isolate them. Go over one side and then back the other way. You're just starting to link these turns now and moving more in a circle. Today I like to pause in the inverted crawl position and really get that stretch, press my chest up towards the ceiling and drive my arms down into the floor. That's giving me a really good shoulder stretch and chest stretch. Just remember to keep breathing and keep the transition smooth. Next pattern, lowering down to the ground for the prone press up to overhead reach. This is kind of like a cobra position, but I hike one leg up to the side and I'm using that to give me a little extra elevation. Again, very helpful to use your imagination here. Picture an object just out of your reach. So as you press up, the eyes go upwards, the hand extends, reaching towards this imaginary obstacle. Or better yet, if you can place something there that you're actually trying to reach, it's going to make your movements that much more real. So if you're paying attention, you can see I've got some slightly different changes to this position. The back toes can tuck and lift the knee of my extended leg off the ground, just giving me a little bit extra effort, a little bit extra range of motion in there as well. I can start to reach back. Whichever knee I'm hiking up, I can keep that knee down or I can come up onto the toes. There's just a lot of room to play with this one, and it's a really awesome full body stretch. Next pattern, to our foot hand crawl lunge. Drive forward, step into that crawl, and then rock back into more of a straight leg hinge position. And then finally falling into a sprawl. So once again, foot hand crawl position, lunge forward, mobilize the hip, maybe add some reaches, and then the sprawling action where I take the hips to the ground and start to add some extension into the spine. Crawl right, crawl lunge left, load it back, and sprawl. Again, very important here that you don't move into any painful ranges of motion. If you're feeling any too much stress in your back during the sprawl or any impingement in the hips for the lunge, modify these movements to make them work for you. Last few seconds. Any last variations of the movement you want to get in. I'm going to hop forward and transition into a deep squat to finish our practice today. I'm going to be here for 2 cycles, so about 2.5 minutes. I'm going to begin just in my standard deep squat position. Wipe some of the sweat out of my eyes. But then I'm going to start adding little movement variations. Just mobilizing the hips, ankles, starting to change orientation. Move around in this squat position. Make it work for you. Make it accessible. Make it something that you can use as opposed to just a static position. You can place your hands down to help you shift your weight. Stretch different angles. Even hold the squat position at different heights. Doesn't always have to be the pure deep squat. But we just get a little strength endurance here and a little extra time to mobilize the body by hanging out in this squat position. As you can see, I'm really a big fan of this. I call it a spiral transition, where I'm just kind of reaching a leg, swinging a leg back, and pivoting or rotating around. I'll also come up onto the ball of my foot in more of a knee bend position. This is a little bit harder, more stressful on the knees, but if it's not causing any pain, it's definitely a great position to explore. And I just view it as kind of a cousin to the squat. I've got a wide-legged squat here, sinking into my hips, shifting body weight side to side. Again, always breathing, always trying to find some extra space in my body. Keep moving through any variations that you want, or just hold the position. Really, it's completely up to you what you want to explore here. Giving you some time and some space to actually explore the squat position will prompt you to start thinking outside the box, finding some additional patterns that resonate with your body. So just a few more seconds here. Keep breathing deeply. And making a transition to finish up our practice back to where we started, completing the circle with some diaphragmatic breathing. Deep inhales, feeling the stomach expand into the hands, and releasing the exhalation and feeling a light compression in the midsection without forcing. All right, so that brings us to the end of our practice today. Thank you for joining me for another one of these ground-based movement practices. Hope you got some good value out of it, and we'll see you next time.